Hey friends, it's Jeff. This is Around the Circle. I am with the Christina Young. Christina is the mother to 3 autistic children. She is the creator of the Autistic Enneagram. She is likewise an Enneagram 1. And we're going to have fun today as parents of neurodivergent children. I seldom, Christina, talk to other parents of neurodivergent children, so I have no idea where this will go and where we're really going to connect, but thank you for making time to be with us.
Of course, I am elated to be here, and I will say I probably talk to parents of neurodivergent children for like 60% of my day, so that is one space I feel super comfortable with, and the Enneagram is my favorite thing, so I'm so excited to be here.
You have the lowdown already. Well, let's start with your kids. How old are your kids?
Sure, we have 10-year-old twin boys and a 8-year-old daughter.
This will be some of the places where I don't know the vocabulary and I might misstep when talking about the severity, when talking about how neurodivergence affects them. How would you describe your 3 kids?
Sure. So I think that the best way that I've learned to talk about that is not necessarily level or, sometimes they'll give you a diagnostic of a 1 or a 4. So my 3 kiddos, they're autistic. They each have ADHD. And their neurowiring is different in how it shows up, with how it dysregulates them, with how it interrupts, say, their academics or their social interactions. But all 3 have been in early intervention since the twins were 2 and Alex was 4, but from a very young age. So we've been incredibly fortunate in where they've gotten services and they've learned how to understand how their neurowiring makes them different, as well as learn, strategies and accommodations to really help them to the place they are today, which all 3 are thriving in inclusive classrooms. And so when I talk about their neurodivergence, it's really along the lines of their 3 autistic kiddos with some fun neurospicy ADHD in there, so that's how I would best describe them.
The spicy ADHD that's on top. This has been recently discovered for us as well. The spiciness that is added. So as you know, I have a 21-year-old who still lives with us and is trying to go to college. I think back to the fact that Augie is our firstborn, knew nothing about neurodivergence. Was that your experience as well? Did you know anything about
we knew nothing.
Autism going in?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what did it look like for you to move down those roads? Because I haven't ever spoken about this, but I would love to hear your story.
Sure. Yeah. So I will be fair and say that we were raising twins.
Yeah, right.
And these were, we being a two female household, we had to work really hard to start a family, and so we were these moms that were so elated and couldn't believe how fortunate we are that we had 2 at once, and then the sleep deprivation hit times 2, and so and all of the things hit times 2, and so that first year was kind of, I don't want to say a blur, a happy blur, and we had a great village, but we weren't reading the parenting books on milestones. We were just trying to get through, make sure diapers were done, kids were fed, everyone is happy. We didn't know what we were supposed to be looking for. And so I say that because by the time they hit like 14 months, we had a friend saying, hey, you might want to check in with your pediatrician and just see, if they're on track. And we got defensive. I'm not going to lie. My wife's an 8, I'm a 1, and we're both like, we're doing everything right. You don't know what you're talking about. And then we went to the pediatrician and they were like, so we should get them evaluated. And we're like, oh, maybe we don't know what we're talking about. And the evaluation was, scary because we didn't know anything about autism. I mean, we knew Rain Man, which at that time is not a great, portrayal of what the entire spectrum is. And the twins were very different. So they were social, they were lovable, they made eye contact with you, but their speech was delayed. Luca skipped crawling. He went straight to walking. There were certain specific things, like Luca played with his toys for hours in lines across the house. And he was very, the happiest clam, he didn't need you for anything. He took care of himself. Where Jack, if you interrupt his plans or change something, it was full-blown meltdowns and beast mode of an 18-month-old. It was just very different. And so we weren't seeing the same behavior, which meant we didn't even know what we were looking at. And when they evaluated them, I can remember them, white walls, a couple of random toys, 3 doctors, and us with twins, tired, being like, we're doing a great job, we're trying our best, we love our children. And then saying both twins are autistic. And being in the chair, which knowing the Enneagram now, I wish I knew it then, but I cried because I thought I did something wrong, right? Like
Sure.
I had this full blown, like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Also, I should say I carried the children. So that was my genetics. And so I felt a strong internal, like it had to have been my fault. I apologized for crying, and the doctor goes, well, I'd be more concerned if you weren't crying, which also drives me insane that someone would say that to someone, but just because how judgmental. And my wife's sitting there not crying at all, and she was like, so, like, we know our boys, like, I'm not worried about it. She had this very, like, don't tell me what I know and don't know, and I'm going to protect my children. She was very much like, don't go making judgments on our kids, and that strong 8 posture. And so they were both diagnosed. I will say at that age, they got early intervention. So all of a sudden, where we didn't know anything, I dove into the research and I studied nonstop for a solid year, all the things I didn't know, and got them into the therapies, and we got all the help. They had a pre-K program, which made a world of difference. And we got pregnant with our daughter. And or we were pregnant with our daughter at the time, and our daughter came, and so we've got 3 kids under 4. We're running around like crazy trying to figure out what we're doing, and I would say that we did our best, but we probably could have done a lot better had we ever had friends or people to talk to about what autism looks like, about all of the can'ts that we heard that actually weren't can'ts, like, of all the voices we shouldn't have been listening to. This was before Instagram and Facebook and all the social media platforms really gave you the space to tell your story and connect and realize you're not alone. And so those first 3 years of trying to raise autistic twins and then a newborn, we just kind of felt like we were flailing. Like there was just no, I don't know, I didn't know how to do anything right. She was just determined to power through it, saying everything was going to be okay. And we kind of got to a level of when it started to shift. So our twins, COVID hit, and I stayed home with the twins because I had the newborn, and we had a nanny, and we were trying to homeschool. And we basically just threw our hands up and said, we're not homeschooling autistic 4-year-olds. We basically took a break from the world, and we just kind of buckled down and did our thing and said, what do our kids need? And it gave us this amazing opportunity to stop asking people permission because we were no longer out in society. And after doing all the research and understanding kind of the why they were acting the way they were acting, and I should admit, although they'll laugh at this hopefully one day if they hear it, it was like World War III in our house. So we had one twin who was sensory overload by noise, and then one twin who was a verbal, their stim was verbal stimming. And so we had one that was super loud and the other one that couldn't take the noise. And they're twin boys. And the best gift we got during COVID was fake boxing gloves, because we were like, all right, let's go, boys, go work it out. Figure it out. Just punch the heck out of each other safely. And then they'd get everything they needed. And we'd be like, cool. But that was never something growing up that I thought was a good parenting tactic. It was literally survival of, they need sensory input. They need to be able to be in the same space. How can we treat you with what you need right now? And we threw any parenting expectations we had out the window. It shifted from being we're the parents, we're here to raise you of how you should be, to hey, tell us what you need and we will try to meet it. And so that was a really long-winded answer, sorry. But I'm not sure if I answered.
It's setting the stage for conversation, very important. Some of the things that I'm hearing there, and it was very similar to our story, is learning about a category, but also knowing your specific child. Those are different. And when we started our journey on this front, it was at a time where the word autism was not used. That wasn't really part of the vocabulary yet. It's had a huge surge recently, and understanding of the spectrum of neurodiversity. has just, there's so much more. All we knew was that our child had a speech delay, you know, and seemed to, but could could spell elephant before they were one.
Yeah.
And that was on their own. Like, that wasn't us like teaching them that. They like picked that up from watching little, you know, kid videos or whatever. And get that balance is a thing. When there's having three autistic children, and then there's your love of Enneagram,
Yeah.
and pairing those, where do you see the natural overlap since you're doing so much on that front?
So I will say when I discovered the Enneagram, I kind of felt like somebody finally gave us like a map. So when the kids were diagnosed, and Alex was diagnosed at age 4, which being a female, she presented very differently. It was a much different journey getting her evaluation. But the Enneagram, when they explained personality and the way it just lays out and made such sense for me, I felt like it gave me like a map to being, oh, I get this. I get why you're doing that. I understand your behavior now. Because I think for neurodivergent kiddos, particularly, without a filter, without growing up putting layers of personality over it, like, I don't know about your experience, but ours were very blunt with everything they needed, everything they want. Like, it was very evident to us what they were, what they believed in, what they wanted. You know what I mean? Like, there was no filter of, oh, I'm going to behave because this is what's supposed to happen. Like, behavior didn't come. You know, if they needed something, they just asked for it. And I think part of that too is, or I should say, demanded at times. Part of that is we are in that child-led mindset, and I don't know that that was a thing when I was a kiddo. Like, I grew up knowing, like, for standards, or for, you know, I don't know if it's being Italian or being, you know, the good Catholic girl, you know, like that kind of thing. There's all those other factors that, but I definitely I grew up was under that, you're quiet, you do what you're told, you know, like, there was some standards set, and I would never yell at my parents the way my kids yell at me, and they let it out, and they just, you know what I mean? It just never occurred to me. But I talk to so many parents of autistic kiddos where I remind them, like, if you're their safe space and you are child-led and you are trying to teach your kiddos emotional intelligence, remembering that they're of an age that cognitively they don't know that could hurt your feelings. They're just telling you how they feel. And let's hope they raise hell when they're older, you know, like, not just at you.
Yeah.
So I think there were different factors, but for the Enneagram, teaching me kind of first, where I was struggling as a parent to show up for them, understanding the whole inner critic being what it was, and that my wife didn't have that. Even just that element really changed so much of our, like, marriage and our parentship and our ability to show up for our kids, that then allowed us to co-regulate differently for our 3 very different children. And so with the Enneagram, I think it taught me so much about dysregulation and how to meet their 3 different motives, like, quicker, faster, like, with the right strategies and the right accommodations. That's why I studied so hard, and I share it with so many parents, because there was a lot of, like, throwing spaghetti against the wall and hoping it stuck for each kid. And we knew they were very, very different. And one strategy that worked for one definitely didn't work for the other 2. You know, you never had a one size fits all, like, for how to get them through what they were going through. I don't know if that makes sense, but
It does. Your kids are still pretty young on this front, in terms of, like, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking through typing of young people. You have thoughts on that?
I do. So I think the hardest part when I started learning the Enneagram, when I was trying to apply it to kids, was that concept of the no typing until they were, which I completely respect and understand. I just think with neurodivergent kids, when you understand the Enneagram at, you know, I would say not that kindergarten level, but if you understand it at, you know, grade school, where you get all the basics and you understand where they go in stress and how that looks, and that sort of thing, I think there's a lot of indicators that can at least put you in the category of stance. I think stance is wildly taught that you can apply that to kids. I know that Joey and Billy, Enneagram parents, you know, say if you want to start somewhere, that's a good place to start. But I do think that there is a level of, if you know their stance, you can get pretty close to their type when they are not a child that necessarily masks. So I think if you're a teacher working with an autistic kiddo, it's different than if you're a parent raising one at home. And so what I see is different than what the teachers see during the day for my daughter, who will mask all day and perform. But what I see at home is raw, right? And so if you're a safe space, I think you do get introduced to their type. Now, every time I talk about it, I say my daughter is definitely an Enneagram type 4 until she tells me otherwise. Meaning she could say, Mom, yeah, that resonates for me, but now that I know myself, this is actually what that is. I know for sure she's in the withdrawn stance, because when she's stressed out, she goes right up to her room. There's plenty of times that she literally withdraws from a space, or she goes and gets into a shame puddle and hides in a corner as small as she can under a desk. Like, she physically represents what she wants to be internally. And I think that's just because of her neurowiring. It's just how she operates.
Yeah.
And so I think you can see some of those things with children. And I think even if you're only working from a stance perspective, if that can narrow 9 ways of accommodating a child down to 3,
Actually,
I'll take it.
Christina, Augie has never walked into one of my interviews. Not once.
Hey!
Here.
I cannot hear you.
That's right. Just put this in for just a second. I just want to introduce you to this person.
Hello.
It's so nice
Christina,
to meet
this
you.
Augie, Christina.
Nice to meet you too.
Christina is the mother of 3 autistic children. She and her wife had children I guess this would be 10
years.
10 years ago, because they're 10 and 8.
Nice.
I had thrown out to Og that if they were interested in a guest appearance, that we might try and wrangle that. But
we should do
maybe
it.
sometime in the future, maybe we can get the 3 of us and others
That'd be awesome.
who have experience to talk shop.
Yeah.
So
Maybe not for my introduction though. That seems a bit.
Even if you want to talk off shop, always happy to chat.
Yeah.
there you go. Do you have an 8 child? You have an 8 wife, but
I have an 8 wife and an 8 child.
sorry, I was speaking a lot. But did you have anything on your mind, or did you just want to say hey?
I just wanted to say hey and also steal a copy of Mad Max Fury Road for something online.
Of course. I mean, that's
All right. Let me check.
so. Yeah, feel free.
Thank you.
And then
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Love that.
we were talking about your daughter masking.
Oh,
and
yes.
that she withdraws.
So, yeah, I think if you know your stance, which I think, especially if they're a different stance than you, it can be pretty evident. But I think if you know that, you at least narrow down 9 different strategies or 9 different motives down to 3.
Yeah.
So any assistance we can get in trying to support our kids, less spaghetti to throw, so to speak, I'll take.
That was, I find that very helpful. And some of the stuff, Og's in the room with me, so I'm going to be talking about you in front of you. But some of the stuff that we've really noticed with neurodiversity and Og's 8ness, they are a body type. And they likewise experience, as you were saying, some of that sensory overload can be a painful space. Now, their body type is their primary center. Knowing that they're an 8 has been real helpful on this front in terms of being able to have language, not just on neurodiversity, but saying this is how it's affecting your primary way of engaging the world. Do you have experiences of that sort?
Yes. So my 8th son, Jack, he has his superpower, so to speak, is smell. He can smell something, 3 rooms over, particularly if it's not a great smell, and that can trigger him to dysregulation very quickly. Yeah. And the way that I explained it to him, because I do try to talk to them through Enneagram lenses so they can kind of get control back. For him, control is essential, particularly of his spaces. And I found that if a smell or a loud noise interrupts his space or comes in without warning, and it's something that's unpleasant, I've tried to explain it's because it's not wanted. He feels like not in control. So what he should do in those moments is to move to the other room. You can block your nose. You can say, Mom, I don't like that smell. Or, you can advocate for yourself versus often he'd get really loud and be like, that smells awful. Or, blow up impulsively. And it's a reaction to that not being in control and not having autonomy. So the strategy we use in those spaces is to acknowledge that he feels like someone pushed against him. And the best way to push back is actually to remove yourself versus push. I think his inclination is to try to make us aware of that this like interrupted him, and we're trying to teach him to say that's okay, but you can also take control and leave. Like that's just as powerful, if not more so, because then the smell's not affecting you. So something as simple like that is kind of how we're using the Enneagram to try to accommodate him. And when I use language that makes sense to him, to saying, well, but if you want to be in control, what are other ways we could be in control? And he's so fast at processing, he knows immediately. And usually he comes up with it, which is even better, because if it's his idea, the chance of him following it is, double down. But we found that really resonates for him, and that, that helps him.
That's an excellent answer. One of the things as you're talking that I don't think I've put together is that so often parents will talk, and actually adults speaking about themselves will talk about how they would have typed themselves as a child with their security number, or even thinking that my security number is where I should be because this is where I was when I was 6 and 8 and everything was going well. And our experience has been the opposite, that there's a lot of uses of the stress move on our front in terms of 5 space and trying to think through the high side of 5 in order to regulate, as opposed to that moving to your security move. Do you see that with your 8 child, that they're employing some 5 tools?
Yes, very, very often. And I think part of the biggest misconception about neurodivergency, particularly with autism, is, autism, if you break it down super simply, is autistic individuals get dysregulated, meaning they can't self-regulate at a higher rate, quick, faster, and for longer periods of time than a neurotypical peer. And so meaning that they lose control of their body, heart, or mind, depending on, where you fall on the Enneagram map. But they lose that control, and it sends them to that stress space. And meaning, Suzanne Stabile teaches so much about how we go to our stress number because there's tools there that we need to take care of ourselves. And I think that for particularly autistic kiddos, adults, when we go to our stress number, we don't always realize what we need, and we do really behave badly in that number. Like, I shouldn't say badly, but we don't behave. I think her language is we don't do it well. We don't, because it's a muscle memory we don't use enough. We tend to not, I'm at a loss for words. We tend to not behave in it the way that we would with confidence. We kind of flail there a little bit. And so for our autistic kids, particularly Jack in 8, when he goes to that 5 space of shutting down and won't tell you anything, there's also a little bit of a power struggle usually attached with it. On purpose, something you don't need, or I'm going to hold up the whole show. I know we have to go somewhere as a family, but I'm going to double down until we're not, or that sort of thing. But we definitely see a lot for all 3 of our kids when they go to that dysregulation space, which for autistic kiddos is often. It's very, very often. And I think a lot of the time we mistype. If a parent were to type their kiddo, they would mistype often as the stress number, which I think is kind of what you're seeing as well, because they don't feel comfortable in this world until they're older and they've learned accommodations and strategies in where they can independently take care of themselves. As neurodivergent kiddos, they kind of experience this world in fight or flight or fawn mode at all times. The world they process, they don't know what's coming at them, and something like a smell or a sound can trigger them in a way that they lose control, and they can't self-regulate yet until they've learned how to do that. And so I think for a lot of autistic kiddos, it can take a while before they learn how to navigate that and even necessarily get to really enter that, security space, or even really learn how to sit in their core type long enough without, hitting dysregulation again.
Yeah. I probably should define some stuff up front. Jumped right into this, but when you think of autism and neurodiversity and you're explaining it to somebody who has never experienced this, or is it just isn't familiar, what are some of the basics?
Sure. So I try to highlight that it's neurological, meaning so it is in that if you think about your brain as like a motherboard of all the wires, and it's going to wire to all the areas of your body and tell you how to do things. Neurologically, they've got some wires doubled up in areas, and some those wires that are doubled up in areas, they're not plugged into the other areas that they're supposed to be. So as they grow up and as they learn, some of the things they have to be taught, like how to almost undo a wire and plug it in where it needs to be. They just don't have some of that stuff organically the way that, say, a neurotypical peer would have all the wires in the right spaces. And an example that I give that tends to resonate for autistic parents or parents of autistic kiddos, like you mentioned, is speech delays are super common with our kiddos. And Luca, the other twin, was a Gestalt language processor. And I had no idea what that was until I think Instagram became a thing and it started, story sharing got out there. But he was diagnosed as one at age 8. Language for him didn't show up until 4 years old. I spent 4 years wondering if he and I were ever going to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And it kills me to admit that, because I think that talking is not the only way that you can have a conversation with your child. Like, you can communicate in other ways. And so by no means do I say that was the be all, but it was definitely something I didn't expect. And I wasn't necessarily ready for, and something that I felt like I was missing, because I had this naive conception that by the age of 4, I could have a conversation with my child and maybe reason with them and teach them things. And I could see him struggling every day, and I couldn't talk to him about it. I had to kind of decipher through the codes. And so understanding how the neurowiring can be different can really help parents of autistic kids kind of navigate that with them. If someone said, listen, let's wait till he gets to age 4, because cognitively things could catch up. He's trying to speak, which means some words could come. I think I would have done things a little differently. So I try to share a lot of his story, and how talkative he is now, and how he talks with echolalia and through scripts and all of these things. And he just performed in his drama club Seussical musical this weekend. That those things are all possible, and that the milestones that we all think are supposed to be what we live by aren't the same for autistic and neurodiverse kids. And that was a very long-winded answer. Sorry, I keep doing that to you.
All your answers are perfectly timed and very well constructed and insightful. So the one of the benefits, I think, for me for Enneagram is it is one of those places where you can say, here's how I'm different from everybody else. And when it comes to thinking of one's child and expectations, it's just another layer of that. It's slightly different. As you were saying, like, I likewise coming to the table saying, I'm going to communicate with my child in these ways because this is how communication works. And I suppose it's the case. Our own plugs are all in these certain plugs, plugged into plugs, and having to unplug ourselves so that we can get into a place where we can connect with our children. That can be a stretch. That can be hard. Like, parents in general will feel this. Like, it's not like parents of neurotypical children won't have to adjust a little bit, but that was my experience as well. Although Og started talking for the most part when they were, I want to say they were 3. Mm-hmm. Talk about having children who learn from one another on this front, because you are also going to experience something that we did, that my youngest is only a year and a half younger than Augie. And so there were things that Augie was able to do prior to Beckett, but Beckett also could start doing things that ended up, it was a different sort of, training method, teaching method. Yeah. You see what Beckett's doing? That can be an unhealthy thing. Why don't you just be like Beckett? That does not come out of our mouth ever. Yeah. But
But you might think it, yeah.
But there is something like, do you notice how they're walking? You know, I want to say that they started walking at about the same time. So anyway, what's your experience of that?
So it's funny because, and I've admitted this publicly before, so I don't mind admitting it again. Although as my kids get older, I am so much more cognizant of, I hope they're so proud of me that they go to look up things that I've talked about before, and that when I speak about them, they're comfortable, and it's not anything that they're like, Mom, why would you say that? But when our daughter was born, we definitely, the first 2 years, had moments of, oh, this is what it's like to raise a neurotypical child. You know, she used her silverware when she ate, and she would try any food, and she was so easy, go with the flow. She didn't have any transition issues. There was no rigidity. There was a lot of, she had her words. She had her words by, I want to say it was 12 or 13 months, and then was speaking freely, by 2 years old. And there was a lot where we were like, oh, that's so easy. Great. Wonderful. And then for us, around 2 years old, she started to do different things where it's like, wait a second. That to me is equivalent to why Jack did X, Y, or Z, or why Luca is doing X, Y, or Z. Am I missing something? And, in my one brain of understanding systems, the way that I adjusted my understanding what communicating with your child looked like, process and system-wise, I started to plug in those pieces and started researching what autism looked like for females instead of males, to see if there was like that biological, physiological difference. And in that research, I was like, wait a second, these all point to autism, and oh, hey, this is looking in a mirror. And so at the time I got our daughter evaluated, I was also evaluated. And it took us 2 different evaluations because the first evaluators, who were the same clinic that did the twins, said, no way is she autistic. Look, she does what she's asked. She makes eye contact. She keeps looking at you to say, look, I'm doing great, Mom. I've got this. She has no problem if we move her to another room. All those simple things. She's not stimming. She has some words. And what I tried to explain to them was, I'm not your typical parent. I've researched this for 5 years. The current research over the last 10 years tells you that females at this age display an X, Y, and Z. And I have genetically looked back at my mom and her siblings and my grandfather, and now we see where the genetic autism comes from. Like we had traced it back. We had proof. And I think because I had over-researched and I was basically telling them what I saw, they thought that I was trying to get her an autism diagnosis. And I don't know about you, and I don't know that any parent goes in there trying to label a child by any means. I was just trying to say, I see all of this, and her wiring is similar to the boys, and I don't want her to struggle the way that I did growing up. I don't want her to have all of those challenges unnecessarily when I am educated enough to know what I'm seeing, and that there are built-in supports for her now, particularly in the education system, that they weren't there when I was a child, and I want to make sure she has those. And so we didn't have that experience of, Jack and Luca, look at Alex, she can teach you what you're doing. She kind of ended up following in their footsteps. They're all very different. They all kind of learn in each other. But I did get from the researchers or from the evaluators that they thought that she was exhibiting learned behavior from her 2 autistic brothers, which is where I was trying to go with that. And the second evaluation team was like, nope, you're dead on. And her teachers and all of the support systems started to see it as she got older. And we caught it early enough that she doesn't have to mask all day, that she doesn't have to sacrifice herself all day, that when she needs a break, she asks for it, that when she needs academic help, she gets it, that when she can't sit in a chair, she gets a squishy pillow to sit on that gives her ability to move and the sensory things she needs. Like she's thriving because we refused to not listen to the fact that she wasn't flapping her hands and that she had her words, and that meant that she's neurotypical. And we're different because we're so known in it, and we're so researched in it and whatnot. But I just refused to let her suffer the way that I felt like I struggled from a young and early age. So
that's beautiful. My own guess is if I went down the roads, I assume it's the case that I have a little bit of neurodiversity going in. I'm a professional philosopher, and it's not that I look at myself. I look at all my colleagues, and I'm like, if I was attracted to this discipline, it must be I must have some of what they got going on, because it seems widespread in my field. And I see it in my dad. I see it in my grandfather in terms of, just it's just who we are. I find on a flip side of, like, sometimes neurodiversity can come across as this huge hurdle, negative you have to get past. My experience of those who are neurodiverse is that they consistently are some of the most kind people I encounter. Obviously, they are some of the most thoughtful people you'll encounter. My kid passed calculus in 5th grade. Some of the abilities are just off the charts in terms of where they connect to the world and what they open up for me in my experience. Has that, as like, your kids are still small, but when you look at the world through their eyes, or what they elevate that you haven't seen before, what sort of things come to mind?
Yeah, for sure. I think that sometimes there can be an emphasis on what's an autistic person's gift, because there are, like I mentioned with that, wires are double plugged in some areas and unplugged in others. I think that there's definitely areas of interest when a individual who's autistic is given the space and the resources and the ability to thrive in their area of interest. I think the world is unlimited for them. I do think that because they face adversity from a very young age, they learn how to be kind more often than not. And I think that there is a level of compassion for others because of the lack of compassion they can sometimes meet from society. But I think one of the things that the Enneagram gave me when I started to understand the Enneagram, which is why I wanted to connect the dots, or at least maybe separate the dots and understand what was personality versus neurodiversity, was this ability to see where the double wires were versus the single ones based on Enneagram type, if that makes sense. When I got my own evaluation, I scored off the charts for picture puzzles, and he was like, "You're brilliant." I was like, "Well, I don't feel brilliant, but thank you. That's great, wonderful." But he said, you scored everywhere off the charts for autism, but there's just no way that you're autistic." And I was like, "Explain to me how that works." And he was like, "Well, you're in too successful a relationship." And I was like, "Listen, friend, just because we've been married that long doesn't mean that, like, yeah. I don't know how you define successful." And I also had 40 years of learning how to do this. At this point, I put a lot of effort in. Like, it matters to me. I want to be in a successful relationship, so I work to make it work. And that misconception that an autistic person couldn't be in a successful relationship is just, I don't know, it's nearsighted in my opinion. It's just not.
It is one of those things that, as you were saying, knowledge of what neurodiversity and autism looks like feels like it's really, really new.
And I think part of that is that because social media allowed so many folks to share their stories either in micro versions or in long versions, it became, like, I don't want to say the Me Too movements, but there became a lot of, it's okay to share your story and all the things that we all used to keep quiet because you didn't want someone to think something or judge someone. Like, we all started looking for connection when COVID happened in ways of, I'm going to be brave and share my story and hope to connect with someone, even if it's across the country versus, just in my classroom. And I think that really opened up a platform or platforms where sharing stories was honored. And that was what really started to change hearts and minds. I think that before then, we didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about those that internally suffered through dysregulation versus externally showed it because we could hide it. I think that there's a lot of females out there that, like myself, has started, had autistic kiddos, and they were like, huh. And as we learn about it, we hear the stories, we're like, maybe I should check into that, or that all tracks for me, or I did that too. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there's been a lot of story sharing, which is kind of the only way you change hearts and minds. But they keep talking about how all of a sudden the numbers have, tripled. And I'm like, they haven't, though, friends. I was autistic at age 5, and I still am now. Just nobody evaluated and diagnosed me. Like, can we put, you don't turn autistic at age 40. Like, that doesn't happen. That's not a thing, It's just that platforms where we could share stories and learn have arrived, and we're all doing so.
Yep.
So I think that's part of it.
I imagine we could spend quite a bit of time ranting about how this has been co-opted by people with bad intentions in the public sphere and brought a lot of confusion to it all. But setting such people aside.
One thing I'll say, though, I do think
please.
Enneagram, the way that you all take conversations and share people's stories, and that's where we learn the most, I think is similar conceptually to why neurodivergent people are learning what they're learning, because they learn from someone else's experience and see themselves in it. And so I think that for me, that's why I think the Enneagram is such like magic. Like it's just such, it's that human map. Just the way that you could understand a spectrum, I think getting the map of the 9 personality types allows you to just know humans better.
Yeah. What needs to get re-examined on those fronts? What do I need to reconsider from this person's perspective and our perspective? And as you were saying, this is why Enneagram is kind of hit for me at this point in time. It's because we've started to get used to different perspectives, perspectivalism. We have different perspectives on the world that are colored through the filter that is us, and Enneagram's just one of them. And you're exactly right. And I assume, would you say that neurodiversity would count as just as another spectrum through which reality is experienced?
Yes, so well said, for sure. I think for those of us that want to know others and love others and have people know us and love us, I think if you're doing that work, the Enneagram and, say, understanding neurodiversity, if you're trying to be in life with someone who's neurodiverse, or just humans in general, I think it gives you such a better space for compassion and grace. And I think that that's so much of what knowing, the Enneagram does, and like so much of what understanding neurowiring has done for us, so that we can see a child struggling and not say, oh, they're behaving badly. They're really struggling, and how can we help? It's changed drastically for how we teach our children what they can have in life, how to go about that, how we can support them through it. And I think knowing their Enneagram types on top of it has just taught us like how to help them get there faster. As silly as that sounds.
That's well said. What's future look like on these fronts? What do you anticipate? What questions are still going to get answered that you kind of have? What sort of things do you anticipate happening in the future that like we're moving towards? Do you have any sense of that?
So I think in general, for parents raising autistic kids, I think that there is an amazing movement of parents sharing their stories so that less parents feel alone, that more parents can get a hold of strategies that resonate for their kids, that they can get a hold of resources available for their kiddos, that they can hopefully parent with more grace and compassion for themselves. I think that the story sharing aspect of it just really creates a space to understand you're not alone. You're not doing anything wrong, and not everybody knows what they're doing, and that's okay. Just try your best and, make through it. So the work that I hope to do with like the contingency that I work with is to make them understand, that's an awful word, is to help them understand. Sorry about that.
That was a threat.
That was my one. No, but to help them understand that if you can at least narrow down to like one of the 3 stances, that you can stop fighting with your independent stance children, thinking as they're trying to move, shape the world in the way they want it to be, that it's not an attack on you if you're in a responsive stance. Something as simple as helping identify the relationship aspects despite any neurodivergent wiring. It can alleviate some of the unnecessarily hard that comes with parenting autistic kiddos in a world that is not built for them. And even though I really hope we get better about building that world for them, I don't know that it'll happen in the next 10 or 20 years. I think our kids, Augie being older than mine, but even my children 10 years behind him, they have a road ahead that's not going to be easy. I'm hoping that we make it easier to navigate, where we give them the confidence and the love to understand they deserve to be here. They're worthy of whatever they want to do in this life, and they are not limited because their neurowiring is different. But they will meet adversity that some of their peers won't. And there will be awful conversations had by not as informed people that are going to hurt their feelings. And there are going to be judgments made on them just because people think they have permission to judge. And I can't change that, but I can tell them that even if those things happen, that they are still amazing and wonderful. And you know what I mean? Like, so it's learning how to support them the best you can, and hope to heavens that nothing breaks them, that you didn't build some resilience, while you could.
Yeah. Two questions to end. A primary for us is a mantra. And of course, have a 21-year-old. So for those of you who are a little earlier, who may have neurodivergent kids, something that's been really helpful for my heart and mind, and what has been communicated to Dog, is something to the effect of, I don't care what you can't do. I really, really care what you can do. And nearly all of our energy seeks to hit that sweet spot. We want to elevate the things, the places where they flourish. And it overrides with a lot of Enneagram stuff that I believe, which is, who you aren't isn't interesting. And that has gone really into how I come to parenting. So I suppose this is just one question, not two, but if you were to give advice to parents of neurodivergent children, what comes to your mind first?
So I think the way we can show up for our kids is being willing to see them as they are, in that concept of, the who you aren't isn't interesting. But if you need autonomy and that's what matters most to you, let me support that. If you need to feel seen and connected as you wish to be seen and connected, let me support that. If you need all of the information to feel safe and secure, let me support that. Like, I think even just helping to build your small world into what they need, knowing what you know about the Enneagram and then knowing what you know about their neurodiversity, can really create such a safe space where they build that muscle memory, where they give themselves permission to be themselves. Like that whole concept of the world needs you to be who you were meant to be. Take away the noise. Like, not all of us are in the independent stance. Some of us hear the noise louder than others. How can we create spaces where you can say, shut off noise, or ground yourself in facts of, nope, I did this, so I know I'm okay, that sort of thing. So I think anything that you can do, knowing the Enneagram, because I do think humans are humans, right? And I think the Enneagram gives us such incredible knowledge about what we want to and what we need to feel safe, secure, and happy. And if you can help support a neurodivergent kiddo to not let their neurowiring stand in the way of that, I mean, that's parenting right there. That's phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah, to double down on that, like, one of the things, this is not it's not a sickness.
Correct.
This is who your child actually is. If you can't remove this, like, this is it's at a genetic level, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So,
it's not a disease. It's just a diagnosis. It's just an understanding of what their neurological makeup is.
So, friends, there's no quote unquote cure for this. What there is your child, and how their soul is fashioned is what you're experiencing. I mean, there's but everyone has I've some of the issues that some of my friends who are parents have with their children are things I'll never experience. Like, your kid's wild, aren't they? Is not something that comes out of my mouth when I talk about my own kid. Yeah.
You didn't have to buy those punching gloves. Yeah.
So, yeah, everybody's got their thing. But what a delight talking to you. I'm really glad that we connected, Christina. I'm looking forward to talking with you in the future again, if we can make something happen of that sort. But presently you're doing great work. If folks want to connect with you, what's the best way?
Sure. So I have a website out there, theautistic.enneagram.com, which has resources for parents and for teachers and for autistic individuals themselves. I'm trying to just build a platform which puts out all of the connection from what I see with the Enneagram and ways to better support autistic kiddos out there. And Christina at theautistic.enneagram.com is my email, and Twinning with Autism is my social media Instagram handle that we post to frequently.
Wonderful. Well, I'm thrilled that you occupy that space with such grace. Super important space for, I'm sure, like for a lot of us who kind of do niche work, we're just looking for our person who's been there. And I imagine that your work is really important to a lot of people. So thank you for being that person.
Thank you. Thank you
much
for
love
all that
to your,
you guys do. We love this.
Thank you.
We love your podcast so much.
I appreciate it. What's your wife's name? I missed that.
Steph.
Steph. Much love to you and Steph, and to the 3 kids. And I'm looking forward, again, to connecting with you in the future.
Thanks for having me.
Give me